Hi, everyone. This is going to be a review of footnotes by Eisenman to his translation of the Habakkuk Pesher that revealed the conflict between the Ebionites and the spouter of lies. And we're going to be looking at footnote 1 today. And I will just show you the cover of the prior episode 1, which was Eisenman's translation of Habakkuk Pesher from the Dead Sea Scrolls, dated to 50 AD, the Ebionites versus the spouter of lies. So if you haven't seen this video, you probably want to go back and see that. But this one stands on its own as well without that, because this episode is subtitled in essence, Habakkuk 2, verse 4. So that's the first footnote 1 issue that will be brought up. And this is described here. Dead Sea Scroll of the Ebionite commentary rejects the spouter of lies, or Paul, if you will, faith alone view. So we'll take a look at that today, and hopefully you'll learn some more points about how to test Paul. If you're a Paulinist, or if you're a person trying to help your friends and family turn back to Christ and away from Paul, that would be this would be an important passage, because it proves Paul does not know Hebrew. Seriously. And that's what you have to understand. He doesn't know Hebrew, or he deliberately lied to people. So you have to pick one or the other. It's not that he gets it right. He gets Habakkuk 2, verse 4 completely wrong, as we shall see. Anyway, again, this is the Eisenman text that we're looking at, footnote 1, 2. Now let's take a look here. This is the footnote 1. The first use of amal. Now, you don't know the context. I'll show you the context next. The first use of amal, meaning suffering or works, or suffering works, which will become so important later in the document vis-a-vis the ideologies of the righteous teacher and the liar. Okay, so let's take a look at what we're talking about. Now, in order to understand what you're about to read about the context of footnote 1, you have to know what Habakkuk 2, verse 4 talks about, because that's what we're going to be looking at in the KJV translation. So we're going to go with that just for the moment. Behold, his soul, which is lifted up, proud person, is not upright in him, but the just shall live by his faith. That's how it's translated in the King James Version. So it agrees with Paul. So you would say, oh, well, the King James solves it, Doug. No, it doesn't, because it doesn't mean faith. Emunah is the word. It means steadfastness or faithfulness. I'm going to show you a top scholar who is a Christian, who tells you that. And at the same time, he admits that Paul thinks it's faith without that. So he's being honest. He's top professor, top theology professor, and it's not even disputable. Emunah doesn't mean faith by itself. Then verse 5, yea, also because, number 4, he transgresses by wine. He is a proud man. Now, I'm just going to end here. I have a whole series that shows you this is a prophecy about Paul. This very passage is about Paul. Neither he keeps at home. What was Paul known for? Being proudful, boastful. He said so himself. He has a problem with it. Jesus actually said, I'm going to leave you subject to a demon, an angel of Satan, because it'll keep you humble. That's in 2 Corinthians 12:7. That's the only quote he has of Jesus ever speaking to him, that he prayed 3 times that Jesus, release me from this demon, please. And Jesus said, no, I'm not going to do it. In your weakness is my strength, because this is going to keep you humble. Okay. And again, if you believe that's the Lord Jesus, who wouldn't release even Paul from a demon, a control of it, and Paul said it was an angel of Satan. I mean, we're talking a top dog demon, not like a little demon or a small demon, top dog, next lieutenant under Satan. Jesus wouldn't let him go. So if you believe that's the true Jesus, he wouldn't let him go. You have a different Jesus that most of us would ever believe is possible. But nobody focuses on that, because it doesn't. That passage of 2 Corinthians 12, verse 7 does not reflect well on Paul. But I would say this whole issue here reflects even worse on Paul, on his twice misconstruing Habakkuk 2, verse 4. Not once, twice. So it's unmistakable. He had the wrong idea of what it meant. Anyway, let's keep going. He neither keeps at home. What's Paul known for? Going away on travels and trips. Who enlarges his desire as Shaul, or Sheol. Which one is it? And Paul's name is Shaul. So did he enlarge his desire as Saul? Or is it he enlarged his desire as Sheol, the land of death and hell? Interesting question. God is great in the way he leaves things that we have to solve it by testing his word against the validity of Paul. And 8 is as death and cannot be satisfied. But what does this person do? He gathers unto himself all nations, all Gentiles, if you put it into uh, Latin type terms, and heaps unto him all people. So this person whose soul is lifted up and is not upright in himself, but the just shall live by his faithfulness, as you'll see, yea, also because he, this puffed up one who lives, whose soul is not upright in himself, he transgresses by wine, so he drinks wine. But he transgresses, apparently takes too much occasionally. He is a proud man, that Paul himself says he is, neither keeps at home, that's what he does, who enlarges his desires as Saul, and is as death, that's where Hades and death comes in, and cannot be satisfied, but gathers unto himself all nations, all Gentiles, and heaps unto himself all people. So we have a whole series proving you not just these two verses, but all the way down to verse 10. Every single verse is about Paul. Fits him like a T, like a glove. But that's not what Eisenman is talking about. He's just dealing with the verse. The just shall live, verse 3. But the just shall live by his faith. That's how it's translated in the King James Version. That's how Paul misunderstood it. And we're going to go with that for now. But we're going to show you the Ebionites in the Habakkuk Pesher, 50 AD, the conflict between the spouter of lies and the righteous teacher. In this case, it was James, was the successor of Jesus in terms of leadership in the group, and he was known as Zadik, or the righteous one, and that's why he's called the righteous teacher. And so now we'll get to the text that the footnote 1 appears. Footnote 1 is over here next to the word faith, okay? Footnote 1 is right there. And so this is the translation of Eisenman, and then that footnote 1 will appear. And I've already read you what footnote would say in the first use of them all. Suffering works. And it's all about this verse. So the Ebionite authors, which is mentioned 3 times as the authors, the group involved here for this work, the Habakkuk Pesher, and that's the early name of the church. Everyone agrees, even Jerome says that. That was the early name the apostles called their church, the poor, right? And Jesus said, blessed are the poor. So that's probably where they got it from. And so this is a commentary by this group on this verse 2, verse 4. And the righteous shall live by his faith. Its interpretation. Now, the word pesher, Habakkuk pesher, means commentary. So they're going to comment. What's the meaning of those words? Its interpretation concerns all the doers of the Torah doers in the house of Judah. But you would say, if Paul's right, it's about faith. That is, all Jews whom Elohim will save from the house of judgment because of their works and their faith in the righteous teacher. And furthermore, the arrogant man, Habakkuk, the puffed up man, I showed you who that was, is betrayed by riches which cannot comfort, but rather he opens his mortal soul as to hell, and like death cannot be satisfied. And so that goes back and ties into, like death, who enlarges his desire as Sheol and is as death. So as Sheol or as Saul, he enlarges his desire as Saul and is as death. His desire is as death, a desire for death, and cannot be satisfied, but gathers unto himself all nations and peoples. So now let's discuss whether the word in Habakkuk 2, verse 4, about that is translated by the King James as faith, really means faith. There originally, it's the word emenah. So here is from my book of Jesus Words Only on 2005, page 261, an introduction that I'm going to give you to this gentleman, Ray Dunning, professor of theology at Trevecca Nazarene College in Nashville, top dog type translator, Christian. This is a Christian commentary, Protestant, everything, and he's got all these books to his credit, and I'll go through his credit later. But he writes this section of this Bible commentary, Beacon Bible commentary. He writes the section on Habakkuk. So let's go back, and I'm just going to give you the introduction that I gave in 2005 to this work, and then you'll hear what this professor has to say. Habakkuk 2, verse 4. What does it really say? How did Paul establish the contrary view to James on faith alone? James is very clear. He asks rhetorically, can faith save you? Rhetorically meaning no, it cannot. And then he explains why. And it's exactly, he quotes and paraphrases the parable of the sheep and the goats, where Jesus says, those who do good works of charity to those who are my brethren will go to heaven, and those who call me Lord but don't do that will go to the same place as the devil and his angels. Could not be more clear that faith alone doesn't save you, right? Let's continue. Besides his out of context quote of Psalm 32, 1 to 2, that's Paul, and his mistaken view of Genesis 15:6, these are topics we've already discussed in the particular book, Jesus' Words Only. Paul's faith alone doctrine had one other proof text. This came from Habakkuk. Paul claimed this passage establishes a one-time faith saves without any endurance and faithful living to the law. Paul was quoting Habakkuk 2, verse 4. Paul, however, quotes from the erroneous Septuagint translation. This led Paul to a completely erroneous interpretation. Paul in Romans 1:17 and Galatians 3:11 states, for therein is revealed the righteousness of God from faith unto faith, as it is written in Habakkuk 2, verse 4, but the righteous shall live by faith, not his faith, but by faith. So it's almost like something given to you instead of it being your own faith or your own faithfulness. So he's changed it up and modified it. I'm just digressing a little there. Romans 1:17, but that no man is justified by the law in the sight of God, it is evident, for the just shall live by faith. Or Galatians 3:11. And what he means clearly in both contexts is you don't have to do anything. You just have to believe in some facts and the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. That's what he says in 1 Corinthians 15, 1 to 4. And if you steadfastly believe these facts, these mental assents to facts about Jesus' life, that he died, he was buried, and resurrected, you will go to heaven. It's a guarantee. Paul says so. Paul was apparently unaware that the Septuagint erred in its Greek translation of the Hebrew original, just as it had erred in translating Genesis 15, verse 6, which he made a mistake about that too. The key word in Habakkuk is not faith, which is pistis in Greek, but faithfulness, emunah in Hebrew. Oh, and there's multiple words for steadfastness or faithfulness in Greek, and Paul doesn't use that, and so he's mistranslating. Also, Paul omits a crucial word that appears both in the Septuagint and Hebrew. It is the word his before faithfulness. Both corrections overturn Paul's intended interpretation. The restoration of these missing pieces establishes the opposite of what Paul was trying to prove. Okay, so now we're going to read Professor Dunning giving the answers that I'm talking about. And these are not controversial points. You'll find this in any true good scholarship. H. Ray Dunning, professor of theology at Trevecca Nazarene College in Nashville, Tennessee, did a thorough study on emunah and pistis in Habakkuk 2, verse 4. He did this in the Beacon Commentary. You can buy it for $9.99 at Kindle, so it's a very reasonable thing to pick up. I did it today. It's instantaneous, and then you can read and verify everything I'm telling you, but I'll show it you on the page, on the screen. We're looking at volume 5 of a 10-volume work, Beacon Bible Commentary. You can see here's various scholars, PhDs, masters, and doctors of divinity, all of them together. And here is H. Ray Dunning, and he is doing the book of Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, and Haggai. And this is his intro. This is the introductory page for his work on Habakkuk, and that's at location 4147 in this particular Bible commentary in the electronic version. Here's a little more biography of Hubert Ray Dunning. He's a religious scholar in the Church of the Nazarene and retired professor of theology at Trevecca. This is today's biography. He earned a PhD from Vanderbilt University in 1969. Dunning is the author of many books, including Grace, Faith, and Holiness. And you'll see some Wesleyan theology, Grace, Faith, and Holiness, In Quest of a Holiness Ethic, Search of Scriptures. And I think this says the whole of Christ. It's hard to read, too hard to read that. But anyway, obviously he's devoted his life to Christian truth and being a professor of theology at a Nazarene college. All right. So here's my introduction to the quotes, which I will then crop out of his book. This is page 261 of Jesus' Words Only. H. Ray Dunning, professor of theology at Trevecca Nazarene College in Nashville, Tennessee, did a thorough study in emunah and pistis in Habakkuk 2, verse 4. Professor Dunning gently shows you they are diametrically different. Professor Dunning is certainly orthodox in his Christianity. He does not show any sign of sympathy with my conclusions about Paul. Yet Professor Dunning is clearly showing that Paul erred in his understanding of Habakkuk 2, verse 4. How well, he can't do anything else but tell you the truth, right? He can't lie to you. So he just leaves you to see the contrast, and he just leaves it hanging there, and you have to make the deduction. Paul means one thing, and Habakkuk means Habakkuk means one thing, but Habakkuk in Hebrew doesn't mean what Paul says it meant. That's how he leaves it. So let's read him say that. Here's the fruit of Professor Dunning's study. The just shall live by his faith. The word rendered faith is the Hebrew emunah, from a verb meaning originally to be firm, and is used in the Old Testament in the physical sense of steadfastness. Thus, the better rendering is faithfulness. Faith is a word for which, in the New Testament active sense, the Hebrew has no equivalent, though the term believe is derived from the same root as emunah. So you can't say someone believes something in Hebrew, and it derives from emunah, but the word or the noun here is not that meaning. It meant faithfulness. Amanah is the word used to describe the uplifted hands of Moses, which were steady. It is also used of men in charge of money who dealt faithfully. 2 Kings 12, verse 15. It is closely akin, if not identical, to the English idiomatic statement, hold steady, implying that if one does not bolt, the circumstances that surround him will alter. Larriman suggested meaning of the intention of this exhortation is good. Quote, the righteous Israelite who remains unswervingly loyal to the moral precepts will endure, although he has to suffer for his principles, whereas the wicked who enjoy a temporary ascendancy through their violation of right are in the end overthrown and humbled. So as Farrar says, Farrar is a former confessor to the Queen of England, so to speak, but he was a very reputable Christian theologian in the 1800s. So, as Farrar says, this oracle, quote, contains all that is necessary for the justification of God and the consolation of man. The Septuagint, the Septuagint is a Greek Bible translation. He doesn't mention it here. That was done on orders of a pagan ruler named Ptolemy, and he made up a myth that there were 70 rabbis that came together to do the translation of just the Torah, and they came up with identical translation, all 70 of them. And that's why the word Septuagint comes from the number 70. So totally mythological, not true, but that so even its name is a lie. Okay, and it doesn't even read well in the most Hebrew scholars today would tell you it doesn't even make sense half the time. It's just like somebody who doesn't know Greek, it doesn't know Hebrew, doesn't know what they're doing, and that's the translation. They think it's just garbage. But we are told it's good. It's good for us. The other interesting thing I want to point out here is Tobias Singer has made a claim that what we call the Septuagint did not originally have anything to do with anything but the Torah, the 5 books, and it did not involve any of the prophets or the writings. And so, and he says that all comes from Christians who created this, and they labeled the Septuagint something that was never the original Septuagint at all. Okay, so I'm just going to leave that, put the Septuagint off to the side now, and let's just put a pin in it. We'll get back to that another time. I'm going to do research on that claim of Tobias Singer. You can look at Wikipedia, and they do give legitimacy to what he's saying, and they did just simply say some scholars say what Tobias Singer says. And what we need to do as Christians, we need to prove, have we been defrauded by our leaders by giving us a book that we're told is the Septuagint translation of a work that the Jews had originally translated, and if it's a lie, we need to know that. We were then being systematically defrauded in even another sense. But we'll put that to one side and assume that the Septuagint is something that the Hebrew scholars of Judaism had translated into Greek themselves. That's what we're supposed to believe. And I'm talking about the prophet section and the writing sections. But let's digress back to this book. The Septuagint translates the word there, emunah, by the word in Greek pistis, which does mean faith, but it can also mean faithfulness. But here in context, the way Paul construed it, he used it to mean faith. It was this translation which the New Testament writers, which really is just Paul 2 times in the book of Hebrews once, made use of, and thus incorporated the vision of Habakkuk into the very heart of the Christian preaching. No, I would say Pauline preaching. Don't equate Paul with Christianity. He may be everything that is involved with Christianity today, but the Christianity of that era had to be the message of Jesus Christ, not the message of Paul. So I'm going to dissent from calling this preaching based on this anything but Pauline preaching. The kerygma preaching. Paul quotes this clause twice in Romans 1:17 to Galatians 3:11. I already quoted that earlier. In support of his doctrine of justification by faith. By it, he, quote, intends that single act of faith by which the sinner secures forgiveness and justification, end of quote. So this professor, Dunning, Dunning is very honest with you. That's what Paul meant. We all know that's what he meant. Single act of faith saves you. If you believe, well, actually, if you read 1 Corinthians 15:1-4, it says, if you steadfastly believe, so I'd have to maybe modify it, say, if you steadfastly believe in the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, you shall be saved. That's all you have to do. So we all know it's a single act that if you continue with it, you're steadfastly keep it in mind, then you will be saved. So that's the only thing he did put any limitation on it. But works are prohibited. If you try to do works to be saved, you're going to go to hell. Basically, that's the message, because you can't help yourself. You'll boast and you'll go to hell. It is also quoted along with the last clause of verse 3 in Hebrews 10, verse 37-38, to illustrate the benefits of faith. In chapter 1, verse 12 and 2:1-4, we see living by faith. The text, the just shall live by his faith, 1, faith in God's, by his faith, 1, faith in God's holiness, his justice, his might, chapter 1, verse 12, 2, faith demonstrated and rewarded in watchful prayer, clear vision, and obedience. And that's in Habakkuk 2, verses 1-3 by G.B. Williamson. Okay, so that's it. What Dunning has said very clearly, he's vindicated the Ebion reading of this, that it did not mean faith. That is a Paul construct. That may be also the construct of the author of the epistle to the Hebrews, who likely was Barnabas, incidentally. But that does not make, you could have three people claiming something is true, and if they don't know what they're talking about, if they're demonstrably contradicting God's word, it tells you what? It tells you they don't know what they're doing. It proves to you they are either lying to you deliberately to deceive you, or they're exaggerating and they think it's in good faith, or that they're justifying lying to you because it'll lead you to the truth. And Paul justifies lying for the good of the gospel. If it brings glory to God, why am I still called a sinner? That's Romans 3, verse 7. So he does argue for those things. So it could be a justified lie. It could be a deliberate, malicious lie, or it could just be he doesn't know Hebrew. And let's just go with the fact that Paul doesn't really seem to know Hebrew. He was raised in Tarsus. He's from Tarsus, right? And that is a place of what? Greek philosophy, education. And if he's an Herodian, it means he's really not, he's going to go to all the elite, he'll have elite teachers who are Greek speakers and who will educate him in Greek and Greek thought. And that would explain why he believes in this idea. You just have to believe in facts about some God. That's all the debate pagans ever had. Did the gods live on Mount Olympus? Yes, no, yes, no. They debated every kind of fact about God. They didn't debate whether God had a good law about this or that. Their gods don't have laws. Do you understand that being a pagan meant having gods that you just debated whether, they were a higher God than another God, and, whether they're the one who answered your prayer yesterday, or was it a different God? I mean, their debates about God are totally unlike what a true Christian should have as an issue of what God is like. It's like, what does he want us to do? That's what we care about. They don't have gods that have any moral dictates that they had to follow. That's just the way their gods work. Mercury, god of war, let's go to war. Yeah. And so you pray to him for success in war. So their gods were all about gods who would be your friend in various crises, but nothing about moral rights or wrong, or they were none of them were known for any particular values, morality. So all they had was faith. And Mars, he's going to help me get through this war. Juno, he'll help me with whatever. And so it's all about what this God will do for you. You could call on that God's name and that he'll save you because you called on his name, or you have an icon for him, or so on. So anyway, that ends it. So let's go back to what the whole thing was at the beginning so we can synthesize it. So this first footnote is all about the word amal, or suffering of works. This is a reference to what the real word is, the meaning of this passage in verse 4, subpart 3 here. The just shall live by his faith. And then the Dead Sea Scrolls has it, they are interpreting that means that really they're doers of the Torah. They will be saved from the house of judgment, condemnation on the last day, because of their suffering works, their suffering or their works. and their faith, not faith alone. So that's how Eisenman is translating it, and that is telling you the Ebion believe that this idea, the righteous shall live by his faith, is an exaggeration if you read it without the underlying meaning of the word emina. And we can see that, in fact, that is exactly what this professor over here proves is the case, right? Emina means to be steady. Better translation is faithfulness. In fact, it's hard to even find a way to say belief or faith in Hebrew. You have a verb, believe, but you can't break it down in just to the word faith. They don't seem to have a single word for just the word faith. And then he gives you the illustrations of emanah meant or was used in the Bible to talk about Moses' steady hands, dealing faithfully. It's identical to the meaning of hold steady. It is not believe in some facts, and other scholars concur with what Professor Dunning is saying. It would be a righteous Israelite who is unswervingly loyal to moral precepts that will endure, versus the wicked who have a temporary ascendancy, but in the end are overthrown. And then you see Paul. Where did Paul go wrong? He relied upon the Septuagint, assuming there wasn't a true document in the translation of Habakkuk that existed in that day, instead of his own mistake. So he relied on that, or he translated himself and he made a mistake. One way or the other, it's wrong, because it doesn't mean that. And yet it becomes the very heart of Pauline preaching. And that's where we get the doctrine of justification by faith, one of its key pillar arguments, let's put it that way. And clearly Paul intends by the single act of faith, or steady belief in a single fact of faith, will secure you forgiveness and justification. It's also quoted in the book of Hebrews, and it means, however, but in Habakkuk, it means the just will live by a faith in God's holiness, his justice, his might, which faith is demonstrated and rewarded in watchful prayer, clear vision, and obedience. All right. So that's why the Ebionites rejected the spouter of lies, because he was teaching the opposite of what this passage really means. And that's what the focus of this commentary, that's the first thing it gets to. This is like 10 lines down when you start reading. It didn't take long to find the conflict between the spouter of lies and the Ebion. All right, God bless everybody. Take care, and we'll follow up with more verses, more videos about the other footnotes. It's going to take a while, apparently, so I'm going to have to study each one of these footnotes carefully to provide detail that gives meaning to what the footnote's all about. All right, God bless. Take care. Ciao. Bye.